Today we finish up our exploration of Buddhist and Hindu art by looking at how Buddhist art, and for that matter Buddhism itself, evolved as it moved east in China, Tibet, and Japan. Alert! This is the general topic of your long essay. Pay attention and take notes. Buddhism spread across northern India and into Central Asia and China along the Silk Road, a caravan route that brought silks and other Chinese trade goods such as glass, lacquer, and ceramics west of the Roman Empire and later Christian Europe, and also introduced Greek and Roman art to parts of Asia. Around this time, Buddhism also diverged into two separate paths. Theravada Buddhism roughly translates into lesser vehicle, but it really involves a focus on individual spirituality. This form of Buddhism would travel south into what today is Sri Lanka, and then into Southeast Asia, especially Thailand. But a new branch of Buddhism began to develop in Gandhara. Remember the Mahayana Buddha? This new branch of Buddhism was known as Mahayana, or the greater vehicle. It's also sometimes known as the Bodhisattva vehicle because Buddhists in this tradition began to venerate bodhisattvas. This shift in emphasis reflected a new focus on communal enlightenment and even communal salvation. You've already encountered bodhisattvas, or enlightened beings, who choose not to enter nirvana, but instead stay on to help others achieve enlightenment. Because bodhisattvas have chosen to remain in the world, they are often dressed not ascetically, but ornately, as you can see in these images from Gandhara. You should also note the Hellenistic Roman influence in the drapery and curly hair. As Buddhism moved east into China along the Silk Road, it was this more theistic, more communal Mahayana form of Buddhism that took hold. Buddhism faced some obstacles in China, obstacles that the Mahayana form of Buddhism more easily overcame. First, the Chinese had no tradition of samsara, so a religion focused on overcoming the burden of continuous reincarnation just didn't resonate with them. Moreover, Confucian society was focused on social relationships, not individual self-realization. It was hierarchical, and to the extent that it looked to past lives, it looked not to earlier incarnations, but to ancestors. This new form of Buddhism, with its emphasis on great bodhisattvas and a much more hierarchical paradise, proved more congenial to the Chinese. Buddhism also benefited in China, as it had in India, from political and social upheaval. The Han Dynasty ruled China from around 200 BCE to 200 CE. During the Han Dynasty, Confucian philosophy dominated China, and a stable hierarchical society enjoyed considerable prosperity. But this fell apart for 3.5 centuries, as China was divided into competing warring states. The emperors of one of these states, the Northern Wei, adopted Buddhism as their state religion. When the Tang Dynasty reunified much of China around 600 CE, its emperors also adopted Buddhism and made it a state religion. The most famous Buddhist art from this period and today's required work is this monumental cave sculpture. Let's watch a video clip from the Asian Art Museum that looks at this and other works of Buddhist cave art. The College Board's required image is on the bottom, but I like the panorama that puts this work into context. The Longmen Cave complex was built largely in the 5th century CE at Luoyang in north-central China, the city where, according either to history or legend, Buddhism first arrived in China. The caves contain more than 100,000 Buddhist stone statues, more than 60 stupas, and 2,800 inscriptions carved on steles. The central Buddha we see in this cave is the cosmic or Vairocana Buddha, the Buddha of boundless time and space. On either side of the Buddha are bodhisattvas and other guardian figures. The name of this particular cave makes reference to honoring ancestors, and it's thought the emperor and his wife, later Empress Wu Zetian, had it carved in part to honor their ancestors, a sign that Chinese Buddhism was accommodating Confucian beliefs. While there's some dispute about this, historical records suggest that the Vairocana Buddha was modeled after the face of Empress Wu Zetian, the only empress in Chinese history. Wu Zetian began her imperial career as a concubine to a Tang emperor, then later married his favorite son. When the son, Emperor Gaozong, suffered a stroke, Wu at first ruled behind the scenes and then declared herself Empress of China. The empress used Buddhism to bolster her regime. People believed that the emperor's power was given by God and that good rule reflected the mandate of heaven. Aware of this, Wu decided to promote Buddhism as the favored state religion. Not a surprising move when you consider that Confucian beliefs did not permit female rulers. Wu helped to translate Buddhist scriptures that would help support her rule, and she used her own money to build Buddhist shrines and temples, including this one. She invited Buddhist scholars to China and treated the monks with respect. In return, Buddhist monks declared that God had bestowed power on her. Remind you of anyone we've already encountered who also used art to promote her own legitimacy? How about Hatshepsut? This is the last of the required Longmen Cave images, and it's my favorite. Only the figure on the right shows up in the College Board image set, but I wanted you to see both since they're clearly a pair. So how would you contrast these statues of guardian figures with the Vairocana Buddha on the right? Well, I'd say that the guardian figures are more dynamic. They're really action figures. Their faces are fierce in contrast with the serene Empress Buddha. They also have highly defined musculature. Check out the abs on the guy on the right. The College Board must like these guardian figures. They also appear in the required images for the Todaiji Temple in Japan, which we'll get to in a few minutes. Some scholars think that these guardian figures, which are a fixture in Buddhist temples throughout East Asia, actually evolved from statues of Heracles. Heracles was used in Greco-Roman art to represent Vajrapani, one of the earliest bodhisattvas to appear in Mahayana Buddhism. Check out this 2nd century Gandharan statue of Vajrapani right next to Heracles. These guardian figures are most commonly referred to by their Japanese names, Neo. According to Buddhist tradition, they traveled with Siddhartha Gautama to protect him. Within the generally pacifist tradition of Buddhism, stories about these guardian bodhisattvas help justify the use of physical force in defense of cherished values and to defend against evil. You can see how this might appeal to emperors, both Chinese and Japanese, who were relying on Buddhism to support their rule, but who also needed to protect and expand their empires, which usually meant warfare. Note that in both pairs of statues, one figure has a wide open mouth and the other a more closed mouth. Again, according to tradition, they're actually mouthing the Sanskrit words that symbolize birth and death. In my second lecture for today, I will take another look at the Japanese guardian figures. But first, let's move on to Tibet.